Okay, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Morgan Fong, who's the General Counsel of Instacart. Morgan, welcome to the program.
Richard, thank you so much for having me. I'm really pleased to be able to join you.
It's taken us a little while to schedule it, but I'm glad that we're finally able to do it.
Well, just a little bit. Thanksgiving was last week and came in the way, and I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family.
Totally, totally. Well, let me start by asking you why you went to law school in the first place.
I wish, Richard, I had a really honorable and principled answer for why I went to law school, but the truth of it was I really liked college.
Uh-huh.
I had a wonderful time, and I didn't really want to face the real world, and so I I couldn't deal with blood. So that ruled out medical school, and law school seemed like a uh, pretty interesting place to spend the next 3 years while I figured out what I wanted to do when I finally grew up.
Yeah, no lawyers in the family or anything like that, nothing like that to influence you.
No, my family was in the pistachio nut business here in California,
Oh, interesting.
and um, the thing about a law degree they said was you can kind of do anything. You can do business. You can go into, there's journalists who have law degrees. There's academics and professors, and there's a whole sort of a bunch of reformed lawyers, I think is what they call it. So I thought that it would present a lot of options for me after graduation from law school. Um, Not surprisingly, I, with like 90% of my fellow classmates, though, decided to go into big law
Yeah,
straight away. So
yeah.
I can't say I was particularly creative or innovative in my immediate post-law school
Well, did
career
you
choices.
did you at least like law school? What kind of experience was it for you?
Um, Law school for me was interesting. I was it at Yale, where I was for my undergraduate. I lived on campus all 4 years, and it was a very sort of insular experience and very much focused on undergraduates. When I was at UC Berkeley, um, it was one, Berkeley is just a huge campus with a bunch of different schools, engineering, architecture, etc. So I did feel a little bit lost, even though Berkeley Law itself was a wonderful community. Academically, it was very, very challenging for me just uh, to come from reading cases and much more of in learning much more in a Socratic method way. But I made some really, really great friends, and it wasn't unduly competitive. I think some law schools and
Mhm.
some people's law schools experience can be um, quite the grind. Was the famous movie The Paper Chase, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah, of course.
that was it set at Harvard in the 70s. And that actually one of my writing tutors at Berkeley was the author of that of the
Oh,
original novel.
oh, that
Um,
must have been the guy who wrote 1L, is that right? Or no?
I I forget his name. It's
Yeah,
embarrassing to
yeah,
mention
okay.
it, but not.
Okay.
But I could look it up. Anyways, it's a good book, and then it was made into a movie with was it Sir John Gielgud?
One somebody like that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, 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 yeah. Interesting. Huh. Well, you decided to become a transactional lawyer. Is that something you knew going to law school, or did you take time to kind of figure that out? What made you decide to become a transactional lawyer versus, say, a litigation lawyer?
Yeah, I think the one nice thing about law school is that it's 3 years.
Uh-huh.
And so the point of 3 years is it gives you 2 summers to actually try different law jobs
Uh-huh.
and to try things out, because obviously, as everyone who's a practicing attorney knows, being a practicing attorney is completely different from being a law school student. And um, so my first summer, I was an extern for a federal judge.
Uh-huh.
in the Northern District, but in the Oakland offices. And that was, a lot of work assisting clerks with writing memos, bench memos, and helping sort of draft preliminary versions of orders.
Yeah.
And I think what struck me was that I was more interested in deal making than I was in litigation and lawsuits and all of that. Interestingly, as general counsel, you sort of have to be as a jack of all trades, but we'll cover that.
Yep.
I thought that based on my family's business background, and just my own personality, I liked deal making more. And I liked the idea of collaboration that can come from deal making, even though, they're arm's length transactions and you're at opposite sides of the table. Ideally, it has to almost by definition be a bit win-win situation. Otherwise, you're not going to get two signatures on the signature page. And so that was, and so my second summer, I was a summer associate at Wilson Sonsini, and that was in 1999. And for those who can remember and were practicing then, that was the complete height of the first internet boom.
Yeah.
And Silicon Valley had really established itself that time globally. In a way, and Yahoo was then famously the most valuable company in the entire world.
Yeah.
And so that was where I first got my feet wet with deal making. It was at Wilson during that time, and it was a really, really exciting time to start out practicing.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, I know you at some point migrated to in-house, but before you got to there, did you like working in a law firm? I mean, what kind of was that something you enjoyed doing?
Yes, I did. I found the work very interesting. I thought my colleagues were very smart, and I had the benefit of working with some really, really wonderful attorneys when I first started at Wilson Sonsini, who became mentors to me. And they're still practicing, and they're still mentors to me. And they're people that I regularly bounce, just career advice or legal advice of. And that was really, really wonderful. And I felt that I was getting a kind of a training that was really why you would want to put in what are actually quite long hours.
Yeah.
Quite long hours at a firm. And that was all very, very rewarding for me. And the atmosphere of this and the kinds of clients and the kinds of deals was really exciting. I found the one thing that just absolutely I found terrible was time entry and keeping track of time. I found that to be one of the most soul-crushing tasks that's out there. And then I think at some point, like many people who do go in-house, I realized I was not someone who wanted to be in private practice for the rest of my life. And with that being the case, whether or not you want to stick around and make partner and be a partner, not regardless of whether you make it, but actually it was that, do I want to be doing this for 10, 20, even 30 years? And it was not a sort of logic decision, but it was a very emotional decision where there is a part of your body that just says, no, I don't want to do this. And that's something that I've learned, is to really listen to your intuition and to listen to, your inner voice.
Yeah.
And let that be also a guide in addition to the logic and the, writing lists of pros and cons, which is valuable too.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Well, when you finally got to your first in-house job, what was your experience then? Was it exactly what you thought it was going to be? I mean, what was your first in-house job? And tell me a little bit how you like that.
So my first in-house job, I was it was at Trulia, which is the online real estate portal.
Mm.
And I got that job through a friend, former coworker in a professional network,
Mhm.
which I think is just, I mean, if you do not have a rich, vibrant professional network, I highly encourage people to go out and start building one. It's
Yeah.
really going to be the make or break of a wonderful and fulfilling career in law,
Yeah.
at least in my experience. And so that was my first job. I was a director there, and I basically oversaw the commercial and business law and IP and privacy function of that legal department. And when I joined Trulia, they had just become a public company,
Mm.
um, and it was a good for me bridge between a law firm,
Mm.
which was very much about like excellence in drafting and excellence in negotiation, and really trying to be like these put out work product that is world class, to a role where you're in-house counsel, where of course the work product, the bar of it has to still be very high, but there are other considerations. So speed of execution is a consideration. Making sure that your internal cross-functional stakeholders understand what you're doing. And in a way that I never had at a firm, I actually had to understand what they wanted. What does the finance team want in terms of payment terms? Can we agree to this insurance provision? What does our HR team say about rolling out this kind of a policy to our employees? And that really developed my sensitivity to other concerns of a company and a business that are beyond sort of the what are often called purely legal things like warranties or limitations of liability or escrows and things like that. And so that part, once I made that transition, there was a learning curve, because these were just things I had never really had to deal with at a firm, and they were always invariably the work of the person on the other side of the phone to run those things down. So that part was a little bit of a learning curve, and of course, it's just very different to work in a tech company. You need to learn much more about technology, or the technology of your business that you're at, way more than you ever do in private practice. And at Truly, I ended up, I didn't really know that much about the real estate industry. After a year and a half there, I felt like I did know quite a bit about it, and so that was fun. But that's an important piece of advice I would give somebody is, if you're going to go in-house, you really have to like the business of the company you're at, because there's nothing usually different behind door number two. You're kind of, I tell people who interview at Instacart, you kind of have to be interested in groceries and food and logistics, because that's sort of what we do.
Yeah.
And fortunately, both at Trulia and at Instacart, they're both missions that I find really interesting and fulfilling.
Well, speaking of career, how did you get to the Instacart position? Was that also something you found through your own network? Did the opportunity come to you? Were you looking for it? How did that come to your life?
Network again. Well, the precipitating factor was Trulia was acquired by Zillow.
Uh-huh.
And I worked on that deal and the closing, and I knew as part of that I was going to be given my walking papers right at the time of closing. So I knew that my time at Trulia was going to be coming to an end, and I had planned to take a few months off and then sort of recalibrate and figure out what I wanted to do. I did know after a year and a half at Trulia that I very much wanted to stay in-house. I knew I did not want to go back to a firm, and I think a lot of people, once they make that switch, they find themselves in the same place.
Yeah.
And so my network yet again came to the rescue, and I had this opportunity to talk to the GC of Instacart, who had just started. The company had been around for about 3 years. It was 100-ish people, very small, but had been very successful in early fundraising and was kind of considered one of the companies to watch. And he had just started and quickly realized that he needed to build out a legal team. And so I was the second hire, third start of this legal department, and then found myself just completely buried under 3 years of, they talk about tech debt, legal debt too. And so the early Instacart legal team found ourselves just kind of having to re-architect and rebuild things and set up structures and scaffolding. And I hadn't had to do that at Trulia because, as I mentioned, it had just become a public company. So I had this ability to sort of see what it looks like when you're a 1,000-person, smaller cap public company, going to a Series C, 100 people, classic warehouse south of Market. And you knew that, okay, here is where we are, but I know we need to get here at some place, and this is the path that we can take to do this. And that was really helpful for me to have that intermediate step. I think if I had gone directly from a firm to a company like Instacart in 2015, the Instacart of 2015, I think I would have lost my mind.
Yeah.
It would have been just, I think, a little bit too wild westy for the me at the time.
Yeah.
And now, having seen that, I think I feel pretty comfortable at all of the different ranges that are out there. But that's only because I had to, I had the benefit of those prior experiences.
Yeah, interesting. Well, did it take you a long time to get your arms around the business? I mean, obviously it's completely different than the company you're at before, or was it a relatively smooth transition from understanding?
It was, well, you're right. I mean, it was a completely different business, a completely different industry. I guess there was similarity in that Truly it had a pretty successful ads business. And Instacart, when I joined in 2015, had the aspirations of a very successful ads business. And I remember interviewing with the general counsel, the first general counsel at the time, and what was a 30-minute coffee, we ended up talking for about an hour and a half. And I talked to the guy who led sort of the business function of Instacart. And we ended up talking for 2 hours in our interview too. And so even though it was new, I think because I had the experience at Fenwick and Wilson and at Truly, my mind kind of can put deals together and revenue models together fairly quickly in my head. And so it was fun to actually just talk through how we were going to go and build this business, and agreed that we all had the same vision for what this business could be. And so that was really, really fun. That was really fun to do.
Yeah. So obviously now at some point, obviously you became the general counsel of Instacart. What is the skill sets like? Do you think it's a big difference in, being the skill set take to be the general counsel of, well, now a public company than what you were doing before? And tell me a little bit about maybe how your role has changed. Like now, do you find yourself delegating more, or how do you manage the responsibilities now that you're the general counsel?
Yeah, I think that's something that every manager, whether they're a lawyer or not, has to develop. And it's the distinction between being an individual contributor and being a manager. And there's times where I'm an individual contributor and I'm doing things myself, and there's times where I'm pushing stuff down and I'm delegating it and I'm keeping track of things. And sometimes what I keep track of and how much I'm involved will vary by project. And knowing that and getting that art versus science part of it right is experience and judgment. And that, there was no, at least for me, there was no strict mathematical formula that that drove that. But I realized that I wanted people to, I've always been focused on making sure the end result is the best that it can possibly be.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's me doing it myself. I think I've been really good, and I've really tried to implement the adage, hire people who are better than you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have hired people who are better than me in their respective functions. And so I look at a project and I'll say, oh, this needs the best employment mind we have. And so I'll put that person on it. And then my value add is to provide some strategic guidance to make sure they understand the parameters, like really to make sure that the goals are clear.
Mm-hmm.
And then to just check and make sure, okay, yes, we did deliver what we said we were going to do. And so that's, I think when someone is a general counsel and they realize that, and they realize that they can't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
There's some people are general counsels of a department of one themselves. And so you have to figure out, how do you divide between other teams in the company, outside counsel, different ways to get work done. But I think for every general counsel, the most important thing to remember for your job is, it is your job to make sure your business has the best legal advice it possibly can.
Yeah.
And how you get that is, like, a good general counsel will be very nimble in how he or she goes about and achieves that.
Yeah. Well, you've already talked about, it sounds like, in-house is a very good fit for you. You've worked at a law firm. Do you ever see yourself doing something else, like maybe, teaching, or maybe even just a non-lawyer job at some point in the future? I mean, I assume you're not going back to a law firm, but I mean, do you see that as a possibility or a career choice at some point down the line?
Yeah, I have periodically I have opportunities to guest lecture, and I haven't, just because of where things are with Instacart and the last few years, including the pandemic. I just really have not had the time.
Right.
I think I would I do want to start getting more involved with teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't necessarily see myself being a full-time law professor, but I do think that there would be some fun classes and talks to give around particularly law and how it can be a tool in entrepreneurship to build very, very successful and very durable and epic businesses.
Yeah.
So that's what, if I were to teach something, that's what I would want to be. That's sort of would be my jam, as they say. And certainly I love mentoring. I like to think of myself as a mentor to folks on my team. I love mentoring people that I met through different networks, including, the Asian American and the LGBTQ legal organizations that are out there. And so that's something, and just very related to that would potentially be some advisory work. These are things that I think might be I guess this will be my third act or fourth act, but I'm still very much in my second act here at an Instacart.
Totally understand. Well, Morgan, I really appreciate your taking the time. I know you're super busy. Congratulations on your recent successful IPO. If you, of course, at some point down the line do decide to do something else, please come back and tell me about it.
Absolutely, Richard. You'll be the first.
This is Richard Hsu and Morgan Fong. Thanks.
Thank you.